Let me issue a warm welcome to all of you as heads of missions to this UCT's 5th annual Heads of Mission Breakfast. This event is a highlight on UCT's annual calendar. Of course, I was very sad that in 2021, we were not able to host you because of the pandemic. I'm joined here this morning by a few of my colleagues who I would like to briefly introduce, and I'll ask that they stand up as I introduce them. First is our Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Internationalization, Professor Sue Harrison. I saw Sue coming in. All right, and I'm introducing them so that you see them just in case you need to talk to them as we go along. And then we have our Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Teaching and Learning, Associate Professor Liz Lange. There she's standing right there. We have Emeritus Professor Martin Hall, who's our Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Transformation. I haven't seen, Martin is there, that side. And then our Chief Operating Officer is Dr. Reno Mora. Reno is there. We also have our Executive Director of Research, Dr. Linda Mtwisha. Thank you, Linda. And Director of Global Engagement, Ms. Carolyn Newton. Carolyn is there. Can I just pause here and say, Carolyn will make sure that each one of you has her business card, because if you want to get hold of me and you want something done, Carolyn is the right person. So you just, she's got the responsibility to make sure you've got her business card, and then it is your responsibility to give her your business card if you want to. But you are going to leave with it, because as we go along, it's going to get busy. So thank you very much, Carolyn. We have the Acting Director of our Development and Alumni Office, Sydney. Actually, he sent me a message. He can't be with us today. But we have other colleagues from our Office of our Alumni Development and Alumni Department. And Miss Libu Msengana. Libu is in the room. Libu is outside. Many of them are helping us, but outside. Miss Shireen Badat. Shireen manages UCT USA Trust in the US. So she's based in the US. She's here visiting. We have a UCT Trust in the US, and Shireen helps us that. We have a UCT Trust in Australia. We have a UCT Trust in Canada, in the UK. The Canadians joined together with the US. So we've got people in those different places who are helping us. They are our feet when we are here doing other things. And Mr. Stafford Bomester is also from the department and the Development and Alumni Department. Stafford is somewhere in the room. There he is. All right, and perhaps most importantly, a selection of our established and early career academics from across our faculties. We have invited Dr. Divine Fu. He's the director of the Institute of Humanities in Africa. Is Divine here? There's Divine. Dr. Divine Fu. And then we have Dr. George Mahashe, who's lecturer in new media and an expert photographer. George, I saw George is there. And then we've got Professor Caroline Ngube. He's the DSI NRF Sachi Research Chair in Intellectual Property, Innovation and Development. She's based in the Faculty of Law. And Professor Lynn Shannon is a senior researcher at our Marine Research Institute. Lynn is not here, but I know someone from the institute is here. I'll introduce them now. And it's Professor Marcello Vici. And Marcello is from the Marine and Antarctic Research Center for Innovation and Sustainability. So you want to talk oceanography, oceans, and so on, Marcello is here. Professor Hermanus Wasserman of the UCT Center for Film and Media Studies. There he is. Thank you, Hermanus. And Professor Liesl Zulke, who's a global expert in cardiovascular disease in women. So Liesl is there. Great. So these colleagues would welcome the opportunity to engage with you during the breaks and following the closing of the event. UCT benefits tremendously from having relations with heads of mission based in South Africa. These relationships provide us with springboards through which we can fully harness the strength of influential partnerships. I have seen this illustrated time and again, And even over the past 2 years, as COVID-19 has shown us collectively what it means to live in an agile world. For UCT, 2021 also brought the truly unthinkable when our beloved Jagger Library and other landmark buildings across our university were gutted by fire. Many of your embassies and consulates reached out to me personally, providing support through your words, funding, and offers of new partnership opportunities to support the rebuilding of our university. I thank you all for that generous and spontaneous support, which brought home to me the enormous power of global relationships and friends in times of crisis. So this event today gives us an opportunity to thank you and also to demonstrate the mutual benefits of working together. International collaborations are not a tick box exercise. They are critical because they enable us to respond to the most pressing large-scale problems affecting us at local and a global scale, with needs shifting and growing with each passing year. Tackling grand challenges requires a diversity of people with different strengths and perspectives. And UCT comes into these collaborations as an equal partner. It is important for us that we come to the collaborations that we have with your universities as an equal partner. Our geographic vantage point drives research that can only take place here. For instance, we are located at the meeting point of two oceans, with easy access to the southern oceans and southern skies, the darkest part of the world, and with one of the most diverse floral kingdoms in the world. The genetic diversity of the people of this continent generates unique data that can improve both African and global health. Our people have a unique history. For instance, the Western Cape was historically sparsely populated by indigenous people, quite different from the rest of the continent. It experienced the influx of Westerners during colonization, but also an influx of Black South Africans moving south. The Greater Cape Town area remains a focal point for internal migration within South Africa and Southern Africa. Together with the quality of staff and students we recruit here at UCT, these advantages have enabled us as UCT to play on the global stage and to lead internationally in many disciplines. We are recognized as being in the top 50 universities in the world in a number of fields, including being the 10th in the world in development studies and being in the top 20 for infectious diseases. As a world leader in research, UCT collaborates with a wide network of partners from countries across the continent. And many of them are represented here this morning. And we offer African-born knowledge and expertise. As the core driver of partnerships with you and institutions in the countries you represent, we bring this array of research expertise to join forces with your influence, strengthening both your work and ours, and bringing value to the collaboration. As an example of an enriching relationship over time, I would like to outline a particularly successful and wide-ranging collaboration. And as I do so, I thank the Consul General and Ambassador of the Embassy of Switzerland, both here with us today. We so appreciate the amazing role you have played in initiating and nurturing sustained collaboration with UCT. One of our longest standing and most productive relationships within Switzerland is in drug discovery, led by our global leading researcher, Professor Kelly Chibale. Professor Chibale collaborates closely with the pharmaceutical company Novartis and the Foundation Medicines Without Malaria, both based in Geneva. The first clinical trials in Africa for an anti-malarial vaccine have been a product of this partnership, and the embassy has played a very important role in strengthening and maintaining that relationship. UCT has 2 joint chairs with the University of Basel. And these chairs serve as an exemplar for us in terms of what is possible when we collaborate with other countries, because they've been very, very successful, and not just here in South Africa, but just globally. We have a chair in environmental health, which is funded by the Swiss government and greatly enabled by the embassy. And we have a chair in urban studies, co-founded by the two universities, which includes a highly innovative master's program that we have spoken about at the previous Heads of Mission breakfast. Those of you who were here in 2020 would have heard Professor Sophie Opheld presenting the work that she's doing in that chair. And she spent 6 months in South Africa and 6 months at Basel. And sometimes the students from Basel come to spend 12 weeks here at UCT and get to do their research and their work here. We also have a collaboration between one of our younger academics, Dr. George Mahashe, who I introduced earlier. He's sitting somewhere there. Dr. Mahashe, the Zurich University of the Arts, and the Observatory at the University of Geneva. The program explores how artists and fundamental science collaborate and share resources when exploring common topics. And George will be off sometime this year to spend 6 months in Switzerland with his collaborators. Dr. Mahashe is truly one of our rising stars and a member of the most recent cohort to join the UCT 2030 Future Leaders Program, which I started shortly after I became Vice-Chancellor in 2018 to support our high flyers who will be international leaders in their fields, to keep them here at UCT and to enable them to create other leading academics like themselves. Our future leaders are a truly extraordinary and inspiring group that is selected solely on merit. It is diverse in gender, in race, in nationality, and every which way. And we plan to introduce them to you at the Future Heads of Mission breakfast. Keeping collaborations going and kickstarting new ones was made very difficult with the arrival of the pandemic. Yet even during this challenging time, with the help of our international friends, we were able to start some stunning new programs. These were enabled through virtual meetings, and Switzerland became an interesting partner, an outstanding collaborator in this regard. The Swiss ambassador, together with Associate Professor Co-Pierre Georg and myself, and we continue to support from the embassy. We had many meetings on Zoom. We planned a lot of things on Zoom without knowing when the next wave is going to come. We worked with students here in South Africa and in Switzerland, and ultimately it happened. Professor Georg is working closely right now with the Crypto Valley Venture Capital Fund and their first cohort of African startups. I can remember the day I spoke to Co-Pierre Georg and said to him, here's the opportunity, run with it. We were on Teams and he ran with it. He has organized a study tour to Switzerland, to Crypto Valley, sadly delayed because of COVID-19, but now taking place in May. UCT co-hosted the first InCube Challenge in Africa, a project of the ETH Entrepreneur Club, aiming to create an inspiring environment for teams of 5 interdisciplinary students to come together and tackle an entrepreneurial challenge. They were mentored by Professor Georg, and he will tell you more about both projects shortly. The Swiss ambassador worked very hard to make this happen. The first InCube Challenge in Africa was launched during the lockdown, and it is amazing that we managed to do so much despite the fact that we could not move freely. This is a demonstration of how agile UCT is and how keen our staff are and how projects flourish on both sides when we work together to identify the right kind of collaboration and the right people on each side to lead them. As you know, Vice-Chancellors dream big. We've got big visions. We promise people a glowing destination. And then we've got Deputy Vice-Chancellors who we task to get the job done, to make the dream come to pass. Vice-Chancellors don't make anything happen. They dream, they make the dream tangible, and they make the dream believable. And they convince everyone this is a worthy place to go to. And I have to say to you, We have a team of staff and students here who catch the vision quickly and they run. So I've been fortunate that during the lockdown, we managed to get this much done. And I can assure you, when you're here, if we get a working collaboration, it works. I don't have to be there. Once we set it up and I've talked to the academics and the people in charge, it runs. So linked to what I have just shared with you, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for today, and he's one of those runners who I said, this is what we're doing with Switzerland now. There's Crypto Valley, there's opportunities. The lockdown doesn't mean we can't get things done, and he ran. Associate Professor Co-Pierre Georg. He is based in our Faculty of Commerce. And Co-Pierre is the South African Reserve Bank Research Chair in Financial Stability Studies and the Director of the Algorand UCT Financial Innovation Hub. Co-Pierre is also the convener for the MPhil in Financial Technology at UCT, where he teaches courses on fintech and cryptocurrencies. His research interests focus on the nexus of financial innovation and financial stability. He has been a consultant at various central banks and held visiting positions at MIT, Oxford, Princeton, Columbia University. He's also a research associate at Oxford Martin School for the 21st Century and the Imperial College Center for Global Finance and Technology, and a research affiliate at the Columbia University Center for Global Legal Transformation. Co-Pierre, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. Honored guests, members of the executive, colleagues, it is a great pleasure and privilege to be addressing you this morning. And when tasked with such an illustrious audience and entertaining you while you are having your breakfast, I thought very hard of all the research we do, all the things we are doing within the Innovation Hub, what topic would be most suitable, would be worthy of your attention. And I came up with something that I think might just be up to the task, and that is the question of what to do with pixie dust. Imagine, if you will, that you have just discovered pixie dust. As you know from your undergrad studies in pixie dust and the common mainstream media, how they discuss pixie dust, you will know that there are three features that pixie dust has. The first is that it magically improves every aspect of the economy. It makes supply chains more resilient, it makes financial intermediation more efficient, and it improves every single aspect of our life. Second, its availability increases exponentially. Magically, day by day, we create more of this pixie dust. And thirdly, it does not deplete when it gets used. This is what economists call a non-rival good. Now, as with all good things, there's a catch. The catch is that this pixie dust is not controlled by all of us collectively, but it is controlled by big pixie dust, by a small group of pixie dust harvesters that leave just the grains for the rest of us to glean in the fields. As you might have figured by now, I'm not actually talking about pixie dust because we have discovered it. What I'm talking about is data. It has all these features. It increases exponentially every day. 90% of the world's data has been created in the past 2 years. And what is even more amazing, this number has been true for the past 30 years. It is a resource that has greatly improved the efficiencies of our economy. It has changed the trajectory of history itself. The problem with it is twofold. The first problem is that while the digital economy grows exponentially, it does not do so for everybody equally. When you look around the world, there's over 3 billion people who do not have smartphones, who are excluded from a large part of the digital value creation. And these 3 billion people are underserved, and digital exclusion is actually worse globally than financial exclusion. And yet it is less spoken about than financial inclusion. The second problem is that our data has been captured by what Jaron Lanier calls siren servers. These are big tech companies, 3-letter government agencies in some of your countries. They have collected all of our data, and the value that they have extracted from this ranging from national security, but all the way to the value of the big tech companies, which with just the big five exceeding the GDP of Japan at the moment. So we had this concentration of power in the hands of a few, and it is possible because what I mentioned earlier, the non-rival aspect of data, because I cannot own data at the moment. It is almost impossible to give it a legal standing, but I can't own it personally. At the moment, because data can be copied, data can be multiplied freely, it can be captured by a few companies, and they own this data. They decide what to do with it, whether to use it for the good or the bad, and all of us, we are left out. So the work that we are doing within the Innovation Hub centers firmly around the question of how can we create digital property rights? How can we create a foundation, an infrastructure, technologically, but also economically and from a legal perspective, that would support the emergence of digital property rights as a fundament on which the human right to privacy can be implemented. The one technology that has made this possible is blockchain. And I'm not talking about the, markets go up or down kind of cryptocurrencies. We actually, the course is called FinTech and Cryptocurrencies, but we don't actually talk about cryptocurrencies, which the students sometimes very disappointedly find out throughout the year. We talk about the fundamental features of blockchain. And the one feature that really makes it a key technology for the 21st century is that it makes data unique. Imagine the world's most valuable resource that you could always freely copy, and that because you can copy it freely, it never had a price because it was an infinite supply. And now we have this new methodology, how we can make it unique, how we can create a price for data, and more importantly, how we can enable people to actually own their own data. So we started this Financial Innovation Hub with a donation from the Algorand Foundation, which very generously supports us with 35 million rand. A lot of that goes directly to the students for bursaries, and importantly, we created innovation and entrepreneurship bursaries. So we create a second-year master's bursary for the students if they have an idea for a startup. Officially, we tell their parents that they are still doing their master's thesis with me, while it is a shadow operation, so that they can spend at least half a year or a year working on their startup without being pushed into taking a job. Because the mission that we sort of want to implement and that we want to share with the students is, it's not important to get a job, it is important to create a job. So the hub has four pillars that we build on. The first is the education part. When I started in 2018, there was a big need that still exists today for skills in this space. But no African university offered any program, any master's level program to teach fintech and cryptocurrencies, to teach blockchain and artificial intelligence. There's some data science programs here and there, but it really, when we spoke with industry leaders, they always told us the same thing. It's nice that you create the quants and the risk managers and even a few economists we can stomach. But what we really need is students that can tackle complex problems that are not well defined, that can code, and that can thrive in these ever-changing environments. So we set up a master's program which launched very successfully. We had hundreds of applications every year, which for a master's program is a real accomplishment. We have created, by now, we've trained more than 50 students. We have launched the first specialization on Coursera from UCT, which is a 4-course specialization on fintech in emerging markets that by now has been done by 12,000 learners, which I consider a huge success of what we accomplished here at UCT. We have several online short courses, and just the online short courses themselves pay for the position of a lecturer at UCT because they are in such high demand. On research, we have PhD students who by now have taken leadership positions in international organizations. Just yesterday, one of my PhD students received her final confirmation from our doctoral degrees board that she passed her dissertation. Meanwhile, she has moved on from UCT to Basel, where she worked at the Bank for International Settlements for 2 years. And she is now, as of a month ago, appointed the IMF bureau chief in London. It's a stellar career, and I feel privileged by having students like her in our program. Now, as I said, the big thing for us is innovation. We want to create an environment where students can play, they can experiment, they can fail, but we want them to start creating companies. And so far, there's 3 companies that have spun out of the program. Over 15 full-time, real paying jobs have been created by these companies. We've raised over 5 million Rand in venture capital with support from UCT. And we hosted one of the largest hackathons on the continent, ETH Cape Town in 2019, with over 150 participants, and as the Vice-Chancellor mentioned, the InCube Challenge. And I'll talk about that just now. On the education side, we have gone different ways. I've taken some of the teaching outside of our hallowed halls, and we've gone to an incubator, and we started teaching some of the classes in that incubator so that our students are exposed with the greater ecosystem that exists in Cape Town. At the same time, some of the skills that are necessary to grow this ecosystem are taught to a wider audience. The program, as you will see, is a truly transformative program. Because we have so many applicants, we were able to have a program in finance where the majority of students is female, and the majority of students is Black South African. And it is not a problem for us because we have literally hundreds of applications every year so that we can make sure that everybody who comes has the same academic caliber, and then we can make sure to create a diverse group of people. Many of these students have gone on to do great things, being the innovation lead in South African banks. One of them has moved to UBS. One of them has started his own hedge fund despite my advice and better judgment, but you can't save all of them. So it is a program that really transforms their lives. We take them on a study tour. As I said, as the Vice-Chancellor said, we plan to go to Crypto Valley this year. 2 days before Omicron was announced, we decided, okay, we might have to postpone the tour because of COVID in Europe. When Omicron came around, we were vindicated that we had postponed it because it wouldn't have been possible to do this. So now the students are very excited to go in May. This is from our last study tour where we took them to Harvard and MIT and to Columbia. So we made a short trip down Wall Street and had the little girl that stops the charging bull with the UCT hoodie. It was a truly transformative experience for the students that ended in one of them sitting crying in my office saying, I've never thought that I could see something like this. So that shows you the impact that just small things can have on a student's life and change their trajectory. We have a global network of collaborators from central banks to world-leading universities, to in particular the collaboration that has been most fruitful is the one with the University of Zurich and ETH Zurich that has led, for example, to the InCube Challenge. And the InCube Challenge is what I would call an almost ideal collaboration. And I'm going to tell you why it's almost ideal in a second. But as you see here, the InCube Challenge was an innovation challenge that was hosted within a cube. And it started with an email from the Swiss embassy saying, we want to get a cube, are you in? Sure, why not? Let's get a cube, let's do this challenge. And it wouldn't have been possible without the support from the embassy, and I see Veronique sitting here, in particular, without your support. So we are very grateful for that of the support from the entire embassy. So we bought this cube. Students spent 5 days. COVID protocols were observed in this cube, thinking about new ways to create property rights within the digital economy. Now, the reason why I said it's an almost ideal collaboration is because when the challenge was finished, the cube was supposed to be moved next to the School of Economics here on Middle Campus. As it turns out, somebody cut a corner, and instead of moving it to the School of Economics, they put it in the red parking base behind Bremner Building. So I got an email from our COO saying, well, we've considered leaving the cube there, but all things, taken into account, you really have to move it. Rumor has it, it was in the parking spot of the executive, which I think is the worst possible spot to place this cube. So we have remedied this. The cube has been moved to its new location. Everything is good. It just shows you that the process of innovation can be messy sometimes and can get you into hot waters with your boss. But it's worth it because the projects that come out of this, I think, are really important and have the potential to create a new kind of infrastructure. And I wanted to share just 3 projects with you that I think embody this particularly well. The first is an innovation focus that we did on healthcare. Now, when COVID came around, we realized, majority of people in South Africa don't have a smartphone. So all the Google, Apple exposure notification, all this Bluetooth low energy, keeping track of who you're meeting with, it just wouldn't work in South Africa. Because if only half the population has a smartphone, the chance that 2 of them meet is only 25%. But we know from epidemiology that you need at least 60 to 80% of the connections to be captured for contact tracing to be efficient. So we knew in South Africa contact tracing can never work. We tried to tell the Department of Health, which were receptive and listening, didn't change what they were doing, which didn't work, but it was worth a try. What we did though is we built this new system that is based on QR codes. We used the privacy preserving technology that we are building within my research group to create COVID-ID. And the idea was that if ever you go to a venue like this, all of you would be checking in with the QR code that was linked to a personal data vault. Now, the innovation in this whole thing was that this data vault kept all your data encrypted so that it was POPI and GDPR and HIPAA compliant in all countries, that it was safely stored in a way that we couldn't access it ourselves, that nobody could access it. But sort of the magic of the technology that we use allowed us to do data analytics over this encrypted data. So if you can do that, then you can keep everybody's geolocation receipts where they have checked in when, in a safe place, encrypted, protected from us or any other prying eyes, and still allow the contact tracing algorithm to run its course. So we built this out. We got a $100,000 grant, which was the quickest grant application I ever did. I sent literally one email to a foundation, said, this is what we do. They said, give us your bank number, and they wired the money right away. And we had, when we were building this, because it was at the time when the first lockdown came around, students were a bit lost. So I had many students telling me, I don't know what to do. We have these skills, but we want to help. We want to do something. So we ended up, when we ran this, with 150 volunteers. Several working groups were working on different aspects. We wrote a couple of papers. We did simulations for the spread of COVID in Cape Town specifically, and it gave everybody a focus. In the end, since it wasn't adopted in South Africa, we folded it into MIT's PathCheck Foundation, which is a nonprofit privacy-preserving health solution provider. And it's part of a technology stack that is now used in Guam, in Hawaii, in several countries around the world. And we are very proud to have contributed to that. That wouldn't have been possible, again, with somebody in the Swiss embassy, Jackie Friedenthal in this case, sending an email saying, oh, I actually know someone who could help you. I've heard about your project. I like what you're doing. Let me connect you. And that just opened a lot of doors that would have remained closed for us otherwise. And opening these doors, sometimes it helps if you pull very hard, but some doors can only be opened from the inside. And that is where the embassies and where you can be really influential and where you can really make a difference in the research and the reach that it has. Now, the second project that we did is focused on employment. In South Africa, youth unemployment sits at around 70% at the moment. We have many employers telling us how difficult it is even to hire from UCT. So the numbers that they told us was that they spend on average 450,000 Rand to find a suitable graduate. 450,000 Rand, just search costs. And the reason for that is that it's impossible for them to access verified academic information. So we set up a small startup that uses the privacy-preserving technology that we have built to create a matching market for graduates and employers. We approached the executive. I remember a discussion with Liz Lange that I had. It was really supported by the executive right away to say, oh, this is a good idea. Let's explore what we can do with this. UCT was the first investor from our Evergreen fund that we have. We've built this into a fully fledged product that has put several students in jobs because we've been working with some of the largest employers in South Africa in the financial services industry. And that now is a fully functioning, standalone with a different CEO. Turns out professors can start companies, but they are not suited to run companies. Who would have thought? With a new CEO, it's a standalone company functioning perfectly well, building solutions that use privacy and put students' privacy in the center of the solutions that we build around bursaries. We had a pilot with Standard Bank where the verified information that the system provides helped Standard Bank to make better, easier cheaper decisions on student loans, to help universities identify at-risk students before there is a problem with the student. Because very often, even as a lecturer, you don't see the full picture, because you see your students, if it goes well and they are on campus, a few hours a week. But if there's something in a different department or something else that happens in their life, you don't see them starting to struggle. So we're building solutions that helps universities identify this earlier. Now, the last focus is really on privacy itself. These applications are sort of front-facing, direct applications of the underlying technology. But there's a challenge with blockchain. While it can make data unique and ownable, there is no privacy. There's no private information on blockchain. Everything is always publicly accessible. So while you can have digital collectibles like CryptoKitties, that made some of my students incredibly rich, I have to say, because they told me 3 years ago, these NFTs, that's going to be a thing. And we had a class that was talking about them. They were involved in the early development of CryptoKitties. I should have listened, I have to say, in hindsight. But it's only for digital collectibles and other information that can be public. For the really valuable data, the 99.999% of the data that is out there, you can't use blockchain just plainly because there is no privacy. So we are building infrastructure that allows companies to create privacy-preserving data analytics. So the first application that we did is for digital assets broadly. We work closely with the South African Reserve Bank now, because South Africa is one of over 80 countries worldwide that are exploring a digital rand, a central bank digital currency, to replace cash and have smart cash available to everybody in South Africa. So this is a project that went for almost 2 years now, is going on, will be released later this year. So there's a genuine push to just replace cash in the country. One of the challenges is universal access. How do you have people without cell phones, without smartphones, access digital assets? It's not something that can be easily done. With the technology stack that we have built, we created, again, a QR code-based solution that allows people without smartphones to access digital assets, all kinds of digital assets, just as much as anybody with a smartphone would. That allows them to create personal data vaults where they can store their valuable personal information, to initiate payments, to reduce the cost of remittance payments that we still have and that plague many on the continent. So it's the first universal access central bank digital currency wallet that we created as part of this endeavor. It is part of this overarching agenda that we follow in research, in innovation, in education, in all things we do, to create a new infrastructure for the digital economy, one that is inclusive, one that allows everybody to participate, and one that puts the users, the data creators, at the center of it. So our goal is to create digital property rights. We've made great progress so far, and I'm sure with your continued support, there's nothing that can stop us now. So thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Professor Val Mizrahi, who leads the Institute for Infectious Diseases and Molecular Medicine, the IDM, here at UCT. The IDM is by far the biggest interdisciplinary research group at UCT, which has pioneered cutting-edge research in HIV and TB, among others, and pivoted with extraordinary alacrity to research into a range of aspects of COVID-19. Val is a globally recognized leader in tuberculosis research, being the founding co-director of the DSI NRF Center of Excellence for Biomedical TB Research. She's a former senior international research scholar of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the US. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology, the African Academy of Science, and the Royal Society of South Africa, an associate fellow of the World Academy of Science, and member of the Academy of Science of South Africa. Her major awards include the 2000 UNESCO L'Oreal for Women in Science Award, Africa and Middle East, the 2013 Christophe Muriot Prize from the Muriot Foundation, the Order of Mapungubwe, Here in South Africa, silver, presented by the President in 2007. The South African Medical Research Council Platinum Award in 2017, and the Harry Oppenheimer Fellowship in 2018. Val, Professor Mizrahi, is a member of numerous scientific advisory boards locally and abroad. She has trained more than 70 postgraduate students and postdoctoral fellows, some of whom have moved into leadership positions in South Africa and abroad. Val is to many of us go-go, but is an amazing go-go. She's inspirational. She's a top scientist, highly respected in government and everywhere else, a great ambassador of our university. Over to you, Val.
You know what gogo means? Granny. I don't feel like a granny, and I hope I don't look like one. Ladies and gentlemen, it's such a privilege to be here amongst you. This is the wrong talk. I'm not talking about pixie dust. I'm talking about infectious disease today. So it's a huge, huge honor to be here with you today, to share with you some of our experiences in the IDM, Institute of Infectious Disease and Molecular Medicine at UCT. I didn't realize that the screens were going to be so small, so the writing is small, but you can listen to me. And I want to share with you our experience of what this journey is that we have traversed in the last few years. And the history of our institute is that we are 17 years old. And the message I want to convey is that one can pivot to do impactful research if you have existing capacity. And our capacity has been built on the back of infectious disease research over, I would say, at UCT over the course of the last 25 years. What do we aspire to be? Our vision is to be a place where top people work together to tackle diseases of importance in Africa. So we don't prescribe to people, you must work on tuberculosis. But what has happened is that people have gravitated at this university, which is strongly mission-driven, to impact and use, as our Vice-Chancellor has said, our position here, to impact upon the problems afflicting people in Africa. And of course, infectious disease loom large in that environment. Our mission has 4 elements to it. Firstly, to do research, but research that is leading edge. So excellence is critical to our mission, leading edge and relevant to the people of Africa. We secondly use research as the vehicle to develop people. So my view is that excellent research is the best way to develop top people. And being located here at the top university on the African continent, this is what we do. And we develop people from across the African continent, as well as South Africans, and people from elsewhere, very much like what Co-Pierre has described. Thirdly, we are very translational. What does that mean in the university environment? It means that we take our science and our research and we apply it in our communities. We want to change policy and influence policy, and we want to change practice to improve quality of life and to improve health outcomes. And then finally, in the spirit of today's meeting, we collaborate. And we collaborate extensively across the country, the continent, and the world. Our values are very important to us, and they resonate exactly and entirely with the values of the University of Cape Town. Excellence, collaboration, and transformation. And when people join the Institute, they need to undertake to try to live by those values. It can be quite challenging sometimes, and yet this is what we are aspiring to do. How do we work? We're embedded entirely within UCT. We are not a standalone institute that functions outside of the university structures. We are the first pioneering cross-faculty institute at UCT, where we pull in our members from the health sciences faculty, as well as the Faculty of Science. And I was just delighted, Sue, you would be happy to hear, a person from the engineering faculty is now applying to become a member of our institute. So we have 9 academic departments, people who buy into our vision and mission, undertake to do their research under the auspices of the IDM. And that group of people is of 46 senior as well as high-flying mid-career researchers who do their research under the auspices of the institute. They run their own research groups, they bring their own students, they raise their own funding. But what we do as an institute is to provide the underpinnings for the research, to enable the research. So we provide scientific, technical, and administrative support. And on my good days, I feel like a scientific leader. On my bad days, I feel like a highly paid administrator. But that's what we do as senior leadership in the university. Where are we located? We have got our hub on the Health Sciences campus on Medical School, otherwise known as is actually the Health Sciences campus of the university. We have 45 laboratories there, including state-of-the-art laboratories for working with infectious pathogens. These are so-called biosafety level 3 laboratories. And some of our equipment that we have there enables us to do very, very high-level investigation on clinical material. But those are the laboratories. The real centerpiece of what we do are the communities in which we work. Peri-urban townships around Cape Town. If you haven't been to Gugulethu, Khayelitsha, Masiphumelele, you need to go. You need to see what the reality, the lived reality is for people in the peri-urban townships. One of our clinical groups, very world-famous research group on tuberculosis, vaccine development, operates 130 kilometers from Cape Town. Now, these research groups have embedded themselves in the community. And the tough thing about working in infectious diseases is that we have a very high disease burden. And so we have a very high disease burden, and that's what we land up working on. And we work collaboratively within the country, the continent, and across the rest of the world. Each of those blue dots on the global map illustrates a place in which someone from the institute works somewhere, rest of the world. We've been dominated by North-South collaborations with Western Europe in particular, the US, Canada, Australia, but more recently, the global South is coming into its own, and we're collaborating across BRICS countries and very profound growth of collaboration across the African continent. What are our disease areas? These are the dominant problems plaguing the African continent: HIV, tuberculosis, other infectious diseases, sexually transmitted infections associated with nasty pathogens. You know, the nasty ones, the antimicrobial resistance, the so-called superbugs, we work on those as well. So given that kind of background of expertise, we then moved on the 5th of March, when the very first case of COVID was identified in South Africa. Our researchers asked themselves, what can and what should we do? So our environment that we've created, and we really think our value proposition is to work at the intersection between the laboratory, the clinic, and the community. And sitting at that interface is where we can make a difference. And of course, this means working seamlessly across disciplines. Okay. So we have built a lot of research groupings within the institute, and Co-Pierre has given you an indication of the power and the importance of data science. In our institute, we are looking at data science and have just won a major award from the US National Academy of Sciences to lead the open data science initiative of a big initiative of the US government that is aimed at really building capacity for genomic research in Africa. But we've also got clinical research groups. I should say very proudly that the Wellcome Trust in the UK has one research center outside of the UK. It's located at UCT, located mainly in our institute. We have continued to grow as an institute. We use our metrics to measure our success based on knowledge production and impact. We produce a lot of publications, a lot in the journals that are widely read, which gives us credibility in the world. But also we look at who's reading our papers. And Vice-Chancellor, you'll be happy to see our citations have skyrocketed in the last year because of the research that we've been doing on COVID. At the apex of clinical research is the ability to run good clinical studies. And here are just 4 examples. The top 2 are the top most important publications in the last 10 years that have come out of the tuberculosis field. They both were led from our institute. They're around the field of TB vaccine research. The bottom two are publications that relate to HIV prevention research, vaccine trials, as well as interventions with drugs. So we have this ability to investigate new, to intervene and look at new interventions in infectious disease. We also have, and this, there are a number of logos over here, have led a very, very interesting study that asked a key question that when a person becomes infected with the bacterium that causes tuberculosis, why do only some go on to develop TB? And can we get an indication of what the risk is of developing tuberculosis? Because then you can think about targeted interventions, treating people before they become very ill. And so a study led by SATV, the South African TB Vaccine Initiative, landmark publication in 2016, in collaboration with groups across Africa, North America, and the UK and Europe, published this landmark finding. Those results were then taken into a clinical study, multiple sites across Africa, the second big publication that came out. So this is how we are working, and you need to understand that we are training people using this kind of vision and mission around the work that we are trying to do. And it seems the slides are stuck. Okay, you're giving me 2 minutes here. So against that kind of backdrop, we were poised also, I want to just mention, and I love this slide. Please have a look at this slide. Will you notice that all the scientists I'm featuring are women? We are very, very strong in infectious disease research led by women researchers. These are two fantastic groups of scientists who are studying what is the aspirational goal of HIV, HIV cure. And you see again the logos of collaborating institutions. I think that what Co-Pierre talked about is this decentralization of research. And you'll see our Vice-Chancellor here cutting a red ribbon. This was a landmark event because this was the launch of a so-called aerobiology facility in Masiphumelele Township, which was the home and built adjacent to the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation. This is a laboratory, a state-of-the-art laboratory that has been built in the township. So no more is it a case of you collect your samples in Masiphumelele from a patient who we suspect is transmitting tuberculosis, and you bring the samples to Health Sciences campus, you drive 30 kilometers through the Cape Town traffic. No longer. Now you're able to analyze those samples in the township. And what has been extraordinary to me, very much like what Co-Pierre has said, our students are inspired to be working and studying and researching in the communities which are dealing with the problems that we are trying to address. And I actually think that this model of decentralization of university structures is going to be something that we'll see a lot more of in the future. So COVID struck. 5th of March, I remember sitting in a meeting where we said the first case, and then we knew that there were another 7 cases the next day. I mean, these numbers are just extraordinary of what we've witnessed today. Our researchers moved very quickly. Now, just to take you back to that time, which seems like 100 years ago, supply chains were completely disrupted. We didn't know when we would be able to get any diagnostic tests. So what did our researchers do? We'll make them ourselves. We will home build our diagnostic tests that could enable us to measure antibody levels, and we will home build diagnostic tests that would enable us to measure so-called T-cell responses. I think the language of immunology has become de rigueur, right, in the world today. You all know about T-cells, you all know about antibodies. But actually, we have very strong immunology capabilities and virology capabilities that said, let's build our own and let's start asking, can we build so-called cohorts? What is a cohort in clinical research? Where you take people and you track them over time. And so in Ntobeko Ntusi, my close friend and colleague, who is the head of Department of Medicine at UCT, the largest department at UCT, started a healthcare worker cohort. And this has turned out to be absolutely invaluable for enabling us to answer critical questions. What is unusual about the trajectory of COVID-19 in South Africa is the very clear way about the way in which each wave has been associated with a particular variant or groups of variants. The first wave, we were all dealing with the vanilla strain of the virus, essentially what is commonly called the Wuhan strain. But what happened when the beta variant emerged in South Africa? And this is exactly 14 months ago. Discovered and described in South Africa was the beta variant, was a worrying variant because it looked like there would be significant escape against antibody responses. A lot of fear at the time because we didn't have any vaccines here. Vaccine access was the less I say about that, the better. We were having a hard time getting vaccines in South Africa. So the beta variant emerged. Then, like the rest of the world, Delta came and displaced beta, which was a very interesting epidemiological phenomenon, and gave us our worst wave, which is shown in turquoise over there. This time, June, July of last year was absolutely critical in this country. And then, just as we came out of that wave, Omicron, first described in Botswana, and then described and reported and alerted to the world within 72 hours. The borders closed on us. Omicron discovered here, and as we know, the story of Omicron is very clear. Very encouragingly, and why it's so beautiful to be sitting here with you today amongst people and amongst friends, is that South Africa, like other countries, have shown a complete uncoupling between infection and severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And there's lots of reasons we could talk about this. The brutal third wave is a likely contributor, plus the fact that we've done reasonably well on vaccine rollout. Now, the fact that there is this strong association between viral variant and epidemic enabled South African researchers to do some critical things and to contribute to the global knowledge base. Again, we're getting stuck here. So the first thing that our researchers do is they said, let's use some of these tests. And some of the tests that were introduced well, this is a slide where I just want to position what I'm going to show you of some highlights as saying that this time of the last 20 months has been extraordinary in terms of collaboration, openness, data sharing, and immediacy of translation of research outcomes into policy and practice. Literally, our scientists are producing results in the laboratory, which the next day are featured on the front page of the New York Times, okay, because they are of such global relevance. So our researchers, these two groups over here, developed their own in-house assays and were able to publish in the top journals to show the world about what was happening with the beta variant. Subsequent to that, I must call out Wendy Berg as a brilliant mid-career researcher who has worked tirelessly together with these teams to produce two very, very important studies. The first study gave some insight and related South Africa's epidemic with the fact that we are one of the few countries that has rolled out the Johnson & Johnson vaccine very significantly, in fact, to all healthcare workers. So we needed to understand more in-depth information about the J&J vaccine. That was the first outcome. And then just 2 weeks ago, in the top medical journal in the world, we had a publication that was the very first in the world that basically showed that T-cell responses, which you will get from prior infection, doesn't matter which variant, or vaccination, and ideally from both, that those responses were preserved against Omicron. So the reason why one has this uncoupling is that the vaccines work. Prior infection, if you're able to survive prior infection, gives you these fantastic little fighters in your body called T cells that are able to preserve and tend to be preserved. This was a huge finding. It was an enormous. There's subsequently been 7 or 8 other studies from the world that have recapitulated this finding. And a little story about this finding is that we needed to access peptides, short pieces of protein, that are manufactured abroad because we don't manufacture that in South Africa. We needed to get those shipped to South Africa. And we couldn't get those peptides into the country. Why? Travel bans, okay. So the peptides are sitting in Dubai, and thanks to one of the companies that does shipment for us, they managed to get these peptides to UCT. Our researchers worked 24/7 to produce these data. And from the time that they got the results to the time that we had a paper in Nature, which has been featured all over the world now, was literally 6 weeks. the immediacy, the effort of the people here. I mean, I get goosebumps even talking about what people have done here, because this is not just for South Africa, this is sharing our data for the rest of the world. Likewise, sharing the information about genome surveillance. We don't do that much in terms of surveillance. What we're really good at is we do it smartly. So we have got this fantastic network of laboratories called the NGSXSA, which is called the Network for Genomic Surveillance in South Africa, that draws together academic centers and the National Health Laboratory Service laboratories. And when there's a hint that something's looking funny, something's looking odd, that's how Omicron came up, that's how Beta came up. I would lay my head on the block to say if there's going to be another nasty variant, South African researchers are going to play a key role in identifying and describing it. So I'm very proud of the work that our groups have done. And the last is, again, last week, another story on the front page of the New York Times from our institute. This brilliant young man, Darren Martin, is a computational biologist, again speaking to the intersection between data science, biology, and medicine today. What he does is he analyzes all these sequences of viruses from across the world. And he has done some very insightful work enabling us to track the evolutionary history of these variants, and importantly, to make some educated guesses as to where the virus might be going in the future. Okay. And so I'm going to end there, Vice-Chancellor, and really thank you for this opportunity. My message here is that we are here thanks to built capacity. We need additional support. We collaborate with universities. As I looked at the list of distinguished guests today, we collaborate with universities in all of your countries. Okay. And we collaborate as equal partners. We are not just sample providers or service providers. We have extensive expertise in infectious disease, which we share on an equal partnership basis with institutions that might be maybe technologically more advanced than us. But in terms of infectious disease expertise, I'm proud to be at a university where we ranked last year number 13 in the world in this particular field. And I'm very proud to be here at Glenara at this great university in Africa. So thanks, Katie, for this opportunity. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you very much, Val. That was very instructive, very inspiring, but I also hope that for you, it inspires confidence in African science, that we have capacity here. I know that Africa is not all the same, but there's capacity here at the southern tip of the continent. And we see our capacity as being key, not just for this country, but for the whole continent. And we also see ourselves as a global university. So whatever we do, we want it to contribute to global knowledge. So Val, as she shared with you, some of the work that the IDM is doing, but more importantly, what they did when COVID hit. And they continue to do the work. So we're really grateful, Val, for your leadership and you and your team. And I'm glad that someone in engineering has applied to be an associate of the IDM. This is fantastic. Sue, this is good going. Thanks for the work. It's fantastic. So I'm sure you see the story. I mean, often when people talk about us, they talk about UCT as the best university on the African continent. And of course, all the top 5 global university rankings rate us that way. As much as we celebrate that, we know 2 things. First, that the global rankings tell an important story, but it's not the only story about our university. There's a lot that we do that the global rankings don't capture. But second, and most importantly, is the fact that whilst people celebrate us for being the best in the continent, we want to be the best for the continent. UCT is for the continent. It's very important that we are strong for the continent because we know what can happen if a university that's strong folds. So when you support us, you support the continent. And that's why we Unlike other universities, when we admit students, we keep a percentage. We need to make sure that there's a percentage in our student population that comes from outside South Africa. And part of that population is from the African continent. Even in our staff, it is important that we are diverse, that we have a population of staff that comes from outside South Africa. So when we are ranked 39 in the world as the most international university, it is not just by chance. We look for talent in the continent and in the world. We attract it to South Africa so that it can help us be the best for the continent. Because if Africa doesn't thrive, the world is in trouble. I'm sure COVID has taught us that the local is global. You can't take care of yourself alone. And if Africa doesn't survive, the world will be in trouble. And we want to lead Africa winning. I want to introduce our final speaker. And she's Dr. Catherine Duggan. Would you believe me if you say I'm meeting Dr. Catherine Duggan for the first time today, face to face? I've never seen her face to face. But yes, I hired her. We chaired the committee. We looked for her, actually. We searched for her all over the world in 2020, in the middle of the highest lockdown level, and found her and hired her. She started the work. We had the fire, and she was involved in the fire. It was as if she's here with us. You could have had her tell instructions, because her campus, the Graduate School of Business, was a center where our students were receiving the goods that people were donating and students were managing. And Catherine were giving instructions as if she's down the corridor, as if she knows she's got the layout of the university, but she had never been here. And just the power of what technology can do. So Dr. Catherine Duggan is director of the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business. Before joining UCT's Graduate School of Business, Catherine was Vice Dean and Professor of Management and Political Economy at the African Leadership University School of Business in Rwanda, where she worked on designing and teaching on the school's blended MBA curriculum. She was previously a professor at Harvard Business School in the Business, Government, and the International Economy unit, where she taught leadership and political economy in MBA and executive education programs for nearly a decade. Catherine has been a visiting scholar at the University of Oxford's Said Business School. She has taught courses and sessions on leadership, political economy, and doing business in Africa at various business schools in the United States, Europe, and Africa. Dr. Duggan's academic work is on the political economy of development in Africa, with a particular focus on institutional development and financial sector regulation. She has worked on the continent for more than 20 years and gained experience in nearly 24 African countries. She regularly leads strategy and leadership workshops for corporations and has advised a number of governments and public sector agencies on the continent and beyond. Catherine, thank you very much. I'm sure it's your first time at Lenara. Welcome.
So I'm a business school professor, and so you're not going to be able to keep me behind the podium. So I'm afraid that I'm going to walk around and address all of you, particularly as we get my slides up on screen. I will say I'm going to try not to engage with this instrument, otherwise we're going to have a real diplomatic incident, and I'm going to have to ask you all for advice. So welcome. As you just heard, I am the director of the UCT GSB, the UCT Graduate School of Business, and I wanted to give you a sense of what it is that we do. I have the easiest job today because you've heard some really extraordinary deep dives into what we do at our extraordinary university, and now I get to do an overview of what we do at our extraordinary business school. So what we are is we are a distinctly African school with global reach. We've been talking a lot about UCT as the best university in Africa, which is absolutely true. The GSB is one of the best business schools in the world. And I want to tell you about how we are building the UCT GSB, not just in Africa, not just for Africa, but as a way to educate the world about what it is that we are doing on this continent and what it is that the continent is doing, the exciting things that we see across the African continent. So again, we're a distinctly African school with global reach. And what that means is, first of all, we are the best, again, business school in Africa. It means we have more than 50 years of history as a school with extraordinary academic history. And let's see if we can get these slides going again. So we have this tremendous historical reach and tremendously strong academics. We also have more than 23,000 alumni across nearly 70 countries, which gives you a sense of our existing reach. And we are one of only about 60 schools in the world which are Triple Crown accredited at the level that we are accredited. That means that other schools around the world come to us for mentorship about how business schools can be maximally effective, and again, maximally effective on the global stage. So what does that look like? Well, what that means is in the past 12 months, almost all of this virtually, although I did go to India in December, in the past 12 months alone, I have sat as a director of the UCT GSB on accreditation agencies or on accreditation teams for schools in India, for schools in Italy, for schools in Mexico, and for schools in, the Netherlands. And so we have this ability to transmit what it is that we know, what it is that we're learning, and the innovation that we see coming from Africa around the world. I also serve on a special committee which is designed to introduce new up-and-coming business schools to international accreditation. So in the past couple of years, this committee has been helping schools in Brazil, in Ghana, in Senegal, and also in Rwanda. And so one of the things that I would like to invite you to do is, if you have business schools in your countries that you would like to recommend for this capacity building in terms of working toward top international accreditation, please let me know, because we are always looking for business schools, and it is not limited to any region of the world. There are plenty of business schools in the US and Europe and elsewhere which have also been helped by this organization. So that's the first thing that I'd like to ask you for today. I will also show you, and you've been hearing this all day, that we have close relationships with schools in almost every country that's represented here. And for those of you, this is just a taste of the more than 60 global business schools, top global business schools with which we collaborate. And if we are not currently collaborating with a business school in your country, then I will ask that we have a conversation about how we can make that happen. Because collaborations, as you've heard today, are not limited to research. They're not limited to student exchange, although we do a lot of both of those things. They are also ways for business schools and universities as a whole to teach one another what they know about their own regions, but also about best practices. And so we can only become stronger by engaging more and more with business schools and with people around the world. All right, so in addition to this, let's see if we can get the slides going again. One of the things that we've learned about technology in the past few years is technology always works until it doesn't work. So one of the things that we specialize in at the UCT GSB is being a global leader in sustainability, diversity, and development. And one of the things that's exciting about this is The UCT GSB has been working in these areas for decades. And the rest of business and the rest of business schools around the world are beginning to catch up to where South Africa has necessarily been. Because being in South Africa, being on the African continent, as all of you well know, we have to think about sustainability, we have to think about diversity, we have to think about climate change and development, and we have had to, for a very long time, we've had to think about reconfiguring the relationship between business and government. What does the future of business look like? We intend to lead the people who are thinking about this and building this. And so as we think, again, about what this means to be a global leader in this area, one of the things that we do very well on is we are ranked very highly globally in these particular areas. So first of all, we are ranked, our MBA is ranked 22nd in the world by Corporate Knights, which looks at MBA programs that are particularly focused on things like sustainability and sustainable development. We are also a global leader among business schools in looking at the ways that business schools can champion the SDGs. And we are the only African business school ever to rank in the prestigious FT 100 Global MBA rankings, where we rank 12th in the world for corporate social responsibility. We rank 14th in the world for international course experience, and this may be relevant if any of you have children who are about the age to do an MBA, we rank 5th in the world for value for money. So what does this look like on the ground? Almost all, so 2/3 of all the research that our MBAs do, and up to 100% of all of the research in some of our programs has to do directly with the SDGs. And our students are involved in all sorts of projects around Cape Town, around South Africa, and across the continent in putting these ideas into practice. One of the things that we do through our specialized Bertha Center, which focuses on inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship, is we think about
in community leaders to engage with members of the community to do capacity building starting at home. We also are specialists in thinking about women in leadership. As you've seen at UCT, we specialize in this generally, but at the GSB, we have a number of programs that are specifically designed to increase capacity and mostly to increase confidence for women in leadership positions. And this is open to a large number of people from across different areas. So if you have people whom you're working with, or if you have people whom you know and engage with, these are the sorts of executive programs that we would love to talk to you about working with you and working with companies from your countries to do. Again, we want to show what we can do in Africa, but we also want to show the things that we are best at in the world. So other things that we do very well, you've heard so much from Val about the incredible work at UCT in health. The GSB works extensively to increase capacity and leadership among healthcare workers and within healthcare systems. We also have a specialized Power Futures Lab, which is designed specifically to look at energy and especially energy transitions. They are, again, not only leading the continent, thinking about renewable resources and energy transitions, but we receive executive education delegates from around the world who would like to look at these issues. We also have the best case writing center on the continent, which was initially established through a generous grant from Harvard Business School alumni who looked around at the continent and said, we need more and better cases on Africa. And this is one of the things that we do at UCT GSB. We are looking to tell the real story of African business, and we're looking to tell the story of African business as it interacts with the rest of the world. So again, the second thing that I will ask of you is, if you know of good cases, particularly if there are cases from businesses in your countries which are moving into Africa, or if there are situations in Africa that you think would be very interesting to highlight at home, we would love to talk to you about writing cases about those things. And those cases get taught to business school students around the world, including back at Harvard, including at Oxford. Almost all of Oxford's cases that they use at Said Business School come directly from the UCT GSB. What we're trying to do is to seed stories that they would not hear otherwise by looking at cases that do not get written about otherwise. And so what do some of those cases look like? Well, some of the cases that we have, of course, are about South African companies which are facing serious challenges. That's what cases are always about. That's why they're so fun. However, we also have cases specifically designed about Africa, including cases that talk about M-Pesa, including cases that talk about new ways to use technology that are perhaps less well known, such as Hello Tractor, which is often described as the Uber for tractors. It is a way for tractors to be deployed in areas where subsistence farmers cannot afford their own tractors but would like to hire one for a day. And we also are looking at questions about trade, especially as we see more and more trade across the continent, and we're looking at questions of supply chains. So as all of you know, Africa is the origin of so many complex supply chains. I would like to invite you to look at the picture there on the road and to look at your cell phone, because part of your cell phone has a lithium-ion battery in it. And that lithium-ion battery contains a trace of cobalt. That cobalt almost certainly came from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it almost certainly came down that road, which is the only link between the DRC and the area of the DRC where cobalt is. 80% of the world's reserves in cobalt are in that area of DRC. This road is the only link between that and Zambia, then Zimbabwe, and Durban, where that cobalt finally leaves in container ships to go to China, where it ends up in the batteries that end up in your phone. The scary thing about this road, and this road is the most terrifying road I've ever been on, and as the VC said, I've been in Africa for more than 20 years. The terrifying thing about that road is that's a two-way road that you're looking at right now. And so in spite of the fact that you would never guess it, and in spite of the fact that 50% of the vehicles that you're looking at right now are carrying acid, which is a critical input for mining, there are vehicles, again, often carrying acid, coming at high speed in the other direction. I did not show you the sides of the road, which are unfortunately littered with vehicles that have gotten into crashes. But I do want to say, as we think about the green economy, as we think about sustainable development, everything we're talking about right now, Tesla, all kinds of green changes in the economy, those things all depend on lithium-ion batteries. And lithium-ion batteries depend on this road. So when we want to talk about why Africa matters in the world and how we understand complicated supply chains and what African executives or executives working in Africa understand about complicated supply chains as supply chain complexity becomes something that American and European executives are increasingly worried about, this is something that we are looking at and would love to talk to you more about. So we've also been thinking about how to use technology to do different things during the COVID lockdown. One of those things are immersions, which of course we couldn't do. You heard all about the problems with the travel lockdowns. I'm sure many of you were affected directly by those lockdowns, by the limitations on travel. We have lots and lots and lots of students who come through to visit us from all of your countries. And one of the things that we had to figure out how to do was how we allow them to visit us without actually being able to visit us. So we put together a lot of videos, but we also had live interactions on Zoom. So in this Zoom photo, what you're seeing is a guide who is walking around. In fact, I think it is Masiphumelele here. They're walking around showing students, and the students are interacting. We had our students interviewing small business owners in a number of townships so that students who were sitting in places like the Netherlands were able to get a first-hand account of what the situation was, even though they couldn't currently get on a plane into South Africa. And what you see at the end there is a picture of a fireside chat. It's a fireside chat, in quotes, that we had with a member of our development faculty in the econ department, a member of our accounting faculty in the GSB, as well as a group of students in the Netherlands and one of our staff who specifically put together a braai for the event. So we had an actual fire in our fireside chat. So one of the other things, and the third thing that I will invite you to do is we have recently been engaging more and more with governments, but also with missions for other countries. And so one of the things that I did very early in my term at UCT GSB was I engaged with the government of Lagos State in Nigeria to talk about their development plan. And we've been engaging significantly with the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who sent both members of their mission in South Africa, but also individuals from Nigeria, from the ministry, to us to do a course, an executive education course on South Africa, but also trade and development in Africa, and more of a course on how we lead. So it was leadership, but from an African angle. And one of the things, again, that I will invite you for is we have lots and lots of cases and insights on doing business in Africa. And if either members of your missions or if some of the businesses and others who come through your missions would be interested in talking about this, we would be very interested in setting things like this up for you. And we can do it digitally as well. So people can come to us individually and sit in our classrooms, or we can do things digitally, or we have a facility in Sandton, and so we can do it, for those of you who are Pretoria-based, we can do it closer to Pretoria than Cape Town, although now that the sun is out, who wouldn't want to be in Cape Town? So let me just finish with a quote from one of my favorite authors, who's a Nigerian author named Ben Okri. What he says is, we can re-dream this world and make the dream real. And you heard at the beginning from the Vice-Chancellor the ways in which we at UCT are re-dreaming the world. Where the business school comes in is that we have the opportunity not only to dream, but also, and as the VC said about the deputy vice-chancellors, also we learn and we teach the operationalization tools, the tools to make things happen, which is something which we all know the devil is in the details. The way that things fail is in the implementation. So what we teach at the GSB is not only how to redream the world or an invitation to redream this world, we also teach our students and our executive education delegates ways to make that dream real.